Welcome back to the Change Physician podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Melissa Cady, joined by my co-host, Dr. Kevin Cuccaro, and we're going to talk about a unique topic that really was brought up by Dr. Cuccaro, and it's about the FU money, but you might need to elaborate there, Kevin.
Well, I'm assuming most people know what FU money is.
Yeah.
If you don't, it's your fudge you money.
There you
Except
go.
we replace fudge with something else.
Mm-hmm.
And what that basically means is with the recognition that there's some sort of, we have a monetary system, right? And we all have bills and responsibilities, and we have financial costs with things. And one of the worst scenarios that you can feel or perceive to be in, where you have no control, is this idea that you are trapped to a job or trapped to a practice because you need the money. And so there's this very, very important concept that if you don't have it, is to develop what is known as FU money. Mm-hmm. The FU standing for is if you are in one of these practices and someone does something that compromises your values, that drives you crazy, that is trying to belittle you or trying to make you do things that you simply don't want to do, is then you go, F you. Maybe you don't have to directly say that, but at least the intention is there, and you can leave, because you have the saving stockpile, which is not saving for retirement. You're not looking at it in your retirement funds, but what it is that financial runway or off ramp that allows you then to have a sense of stability and peace while you seek your next opportunity. And it really is imperative that physicians, as soon as you can, start to develop a FU money fund. Like, you could be doing this during residency. Do we absolutely positively have to do it? No, because as physicians, we're in a unique opportunity. But I will tell you, it'll make your life, it'll decrease the stress in your life quite a bit.
Yeah, I think there's, I don't think, well, what I think is a lot of physicians may not focus on the fact that they might need that. I think there's kind of this optimism that what they go into, and you just get caught up with life and your delayed gratification situation, which could be another topic to discuss one day, is this feeling of getting the things that you've been deprived of for so long. I mean, you're deprived of time for other non-medical things throughout your training, and then you're making probably what a teacher makes when you look at hours. I've seen those calculations before, and so you feel deprived of the money too, and so you end up getting in a job you're very excited about finally having the money, and sometimes just people start spinning it in a way. It's amazing once you start, when you increase your lifestyle to a certain point, and it's hard to back off. And so you almost have to institute that early to make that pay yourself first and have it there just in case. Otherwise, you kind of get caught up in your day-to-day living, and you're used to certain expenses. And in fact, that was one of the reasons when I first got out of my training that I told myself, I just need this certain amount of money per month, and I'm never going to work 5 days a week. I don't work 3 or 4 days a week, because I know it's a lot easier to change that if you want to go to 5 days intermittently because you just need a little extra, it's fine. But my lifestyle tied to what I would make at 3 or 4 days a week would not be equivalent if I spent it all month to month. As if I was at 5 days, it would be really hard to change my lifestyle to back off. And we get really accustomed to what we've been doing for so long, and it's hard to intentionally change, especially if you have a spouse or children and it's not just you. I think that autonomy or the variables that can impact that money being spent is a little simpler, but you still have to be intentional about that. And I wish, in some ways I was good about being intentional, and there's other ways I had not been good, but I can totally see that.
Well, it's that intentionality is absolutely crucial, right? And if someone's listening to this and they're like, I don't have a pile of FU money, and people will say, well, it's a savings, or what is it? Your rainy day fund. And this is sort of beyond like a rainy day fund. A rainy day fund or an emergency fund is if there's an absolute and true emergency. What your FU money is, it might be combined in that, but it's a pocket of money that's a little bit greater, and you're looking really to have 3 months of expenses in there. If you're like maybe some crazy specialty that there's only 2 positions in the United States, maybe you want a 6 months to a year on that. But realistically, for any physician, having 3 months is going to be key, because in this, probably not in this particular podcast episode, is if you start pulling apart the limitations the self-imposed limitations on practice, there's actually way more options that you have in order to maintain a level of financial security. Options that are pretty much unavailable to most other specialties. So if you have this, you start saving with intention this 3-month ramp. One of the advantages of starting that process, it makes you become more aware of your spending. Now, one of the things I think is interesting is when you're talking about this is we go through residency and internship, medical school. When you're not making any money, you're actually pulling on debt. Residency, where a lot of people are deferring payments to their loans for good or bad reasons. And then you go into practice, and all of a sudden there's generally an acceleration in your revenue. I mean, it's a dramatic increase. And what I find very interesting is I look back on my family, and my wife is a physician as well, and I look at how our spending and things changed. So during residency, we had 2 resident salaries. Then when I was in fellowship, we had a fellowship strategy. Then my wife was working, I think as an independent maybe not an independent contractor, but she had a job she had a job, she had a position. She was working like urgent care, sort of like a blend between urgent care and primary care. Needless to say, her income from that was easily double what we had ever made. And then we had my physician salary on top of that. Now, we weren't rolling in any sort of crazy amounts of money, but we were making probably 170 something, 100, maybe a little more than that a year. Still paying childcare. Let's not forget that, because then that's another massive expense on it. But we were comfortable, like realistically comfortable. And for the vast majority of society, I think they would be very comfortable at that rate. When you're pulling in anywhere between 8,000 and 12,000 a month, that's most of the population is going to do that. Some physicians, that's too little. Let me tell you that most of the population is going to do that. But what's crazy is then we moved to San Diego, and then now I'm working in the Navy, and then my wife has a civilian job, and particularly 2 years after that, when she reached shareholder status, and our income like doubled or quadrupled from what it was. I will tell you the happiness profile from the difference of me making whatever, $10,000 a month and 30-something thousand dollars a month is pretty negligible. Like, I mean, the actual level of difference was like not much. I mean, we had definitely at some point we spent more, and I remember we used to go out to eat more and do all this stuff, and you're just buying crap, but we weren't necessarily any happier. So anybody who is thinking that, this handbag or the new watch or the new car is going to bring me loads and loads and loads of love and affection and fulfillment in my life, maybe there's a couple people that really are in love with cars, and that does make an impact. But for the rest of us, what you'll find is there's a level of spending that, if you're looking at your life with some level of awareness and intentionality, that allows you to do what you want to do in a way that is not necessarily, I don't want you not spendthrift, but not crazy displays, right? There's going to be some set value amount. You're going to be fulfilled. Mm-hmm. And then I would also, if you kind of go back in time, just see when you had these spikes in income, and whether or not that significantly impacted your life, and you were 50% happier or 100% happier if you doubled your income, or maybe you're 200% happier because you quadrupled your income. Please email me if I'm wrong, folks, but I doubt that you will find that you were 200% happier when your income went up 200%. You'll probably be a little bit happier. Now, so when you have created this fund, though, what that does is it takes away one of the biggest complaints in healthcare. When people complain about their medical practice or hospital system, or in scenarios like we are now with the COVID crisis, where people are finding that they're super safe jobs, that lo and behold, even though you may be on the front lines of care, when all those elective procedures went down, the hospitals aren't making money. You, as the cog in a system that doesn't value you, they're going to start taking away your money or taking away your income. So if you feel trapped there and you feel like you don't have your FU fund set up, now you are in a big problem, because now you're making even less money than you before. You don't have your FU money set up in advance. Again, doesn't mean you don't have any options, but the ability to think clearly in that scenario, because of the extra stress involved, becomes very, very difficult. So I highly recommend that people set up an FU fund. You don't have to put it all in there at once, but just, define what your 3-month, what's a 3-month income ramp for you, and then just start adding it into some sort of savings account as quickly as you possibly can. And that level, just having it there sitting in the bank is quite helpful for keeping your mind at ease, especially during distressful situations, whether that is interactions with administrative staff that somehow think that they own you, whether it's interactions with the hospital system that decides that they want to change your practice environment to do for whatever reason, whether it's because you're unsatisfied in your current geographic location. There's a power in having that cash available to you.
Absolutely. And, it makes, even if it's, worrying about, it could even be someone who's a female who wants to have a child, and they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't expect this additional child or new child. And you want to take, you hear it from so many mothers that we'll probably have an episode on women in medicine too. But, you get these horrible 6-week maximums in a lot of groups, mainly, I don't want to say mainly, but a lot of times led by men. I'm not going to, I don't know all the groups out there, but anyone who has had a child recognizes that is, there's so much involved, and usually people are like 3 to 4 months is like more of a sweet spot, for them. So if you're going to have some FU money, it doesn't mean it has to be used for those particular things that even you, Kevin, mentioned, but it could be not necessarily an emergency, surgery, but suddenly it's like, oh, in 9 months we're going to have to, or in 8 months or 7 months, we're going to have a child that we didn't really plan for. And it's good to have this money so that I don't feel the stress of having to work, so that we can keep her home and, not lose our home. And there's just so many other things that it alleviates the stress and gives you the autonomy to kind of make decisions that are appropriate for you and or your family. And I was thinking about when you mentioned about that point of happiness and as far as how much you make, and I think I'd have to pull it up, but I've seen numbers in the realm of like 70,000, or, there's a point where it's like, you don't have to worry about the bills. And yet still gives you maybe a little bit of time. But I think more importantly, when they compare just the happiness versus the amount of money you make, there's really nothing that is beyond that 70-ish, give or take. Don't quote me on that. But so I think that really makes you think, well, obviously money isn't all about happiness, but it is a tool, and it can make some parts of life a little bit easier. And there's no doubt that there's people out there that haven't had the luxury or the benefit of even some economic stability to allow them to propel them to other things. Those can go down a lot of other discussions, but as a physician, you have the capacity and the ability and the resources, and especially, even home loans. You can get these no money down because you're a physician in some banks. You get privileges, and it's good to seek those things out. And so having that FU money sometimes can come from being smarter about even your taxes and tax write-offs if you're in business for yourself. So, instead of paying all that in taxes and knowing the tax code through your accountant and whatnot, you can take that extra that you save and put that into your, FU money account. They're not labeled that way, but some kind of.
Yeah, you could, I guess, if you have a bank account.
You can label it that way.
You can label FU money. Not necessarily that's a bad idea. But ultimately, it's just an idea, or it's an understanding that if you have that, not only do you have that financial cash reserves, right, but there's a psychological aspect to it as well.
Mm-hmm.
because it makes you much more tolerant of things that you didn't think you could tolerate. Like if you're in a practice environment with a bunch of jerks or people, you know, some mid-level, some mid-level manager who's like, you know, I think these administrators who like the clinic managers, it's like, you're not really a manager. I mean, that's a whole different topic. It just makes me
Maybe
want
we
to
won't go there today.
yeah, but I mean, you know what I'm talking about. Where
Yeah.
somebody with their maybe college education thinks that they're going to tell you how to define your practice environment. Let me tell you, if you have that money in the bank, it makes it much easier to just to look at them in the face and listen to them and let them speak and be very respectful, because we are good human beings. But just be able to calmly and say, you know, thank you for that information. I appreciate you telling me this, right? And then that's it, because they can't dictate how you practice. But it gives you that freedom to tolerate, right? And it's so much different when you're in a situation where someone's telling you to do something and now you feel you have to comply because you have to, versus you're complying because you choose to. Psychologically, I mean, it's basically the same thing you would think in reality, but from a psychological and physiological perspective, based on how you perceive stress, completely different from the human experience standpoint.
Yeah, and I'll have to say the flip is also true too, that the FU money doesn't also help you tolerate. It also lets you choose not to tolerate and get the hell out of Dodge.
Well, yeah, and it supports the choice, right? Because realistically, you always have a choice.
Mm-hmm.
The difference, though, is if you have that FU money in stash, it's a support to that psychological decision, right? It provides sort of that ammunition there, provides sort of, again, I'm going to just call it psychological ammo, to help you return that sense of control to yourself. And it's always good to retain that sense of control.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought up the FU money, Dr.
Glad you said
Cuccaro.
FU to me when we started.
I know, we had to cut that. That would be pulled out of context really fast and would not reflect well. So anyway, for those that are joining us, just a reminder that, you know, there are ways to be intentional and keep money aside for those unexpected times, whether it's during a pandemic or it's during a moment of awareness that the place you work is not a good fit and you need to escape. Whatever that might be, it's good to give some thought to this. And I hope that all that are watching stay tuned for the next episode. I am Dr. Melissa Cady, the host, with my co-host, Dr. Kevin Cuccaro. And we look forward to seeing you within the community at thechangephysician.com or on our next episode. Take care.
Stay well, folks.